You're listening to the Sage Planning Solutions Podcast. Securities and advisory services offered through Catteray Grant & Company Incorporated, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. Catteray Grant and Sage Planning Solutions are separate and unaffiliated entities. The information provided here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or personalized investment advice. Any opinions or forecasts contained herein reflect the subjective judgments and assumptions of the authors only and do not necessarily reflect the views of Catteray Grant & Company Incorporated. Investing is subject to risks including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax, legal, or investment planning advice. Neither Catteray Grant & Company Incorporated nor its registered representatives or employees provide tax or legal services. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice.
Welcome to the Sage Planning Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Ruiz, and I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, Brian Marquez and Matthew Medlock. In today's episode, we will be discussing Boomerang Kids and factors fueling them to live longer at home with their parents. Gentlemen, this is a conversation that I'm having more frequently with clients and prospective clients due to a combination of factors such as cost of housing, student debt, and the job market, to name a few. And according to numerous reports, about 13% of adults aging from 18 to 29 have moved back home or stayed at home, primarily due to the fact that I mentioned above, which is the cost of housing, student debt, and the job market. What has been your personal experience or professional experience with this topic, gentlemen?
I have both personal experience and professional experience with this topic. A lot of us in our families nowadays, we have someone in our families probably who fits that description, don't we? Whether it's failure to launch, whether it's conditioned or accepted, or sort of like, hey, it's better off we just let that person kind of be who they are on our couch rather than wherever they're at, making our lives miserable. Professionally, just recently, I have some anecdotal experience. A wonderful client of mine was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia, which is sort of similar, I guess, to what Bruce Willis was recently diagnosed with. And her daughter, who is sort of at this point her caregiver, has basically said, hey, there's no treatment for this other than kind of managing her, and hopefully she is going to be okay. But the ultimate diagnosis here is that she's going to lose her ability to communicate. And it's really difficult. The client herself has an adult son who's in his late 30s. I believe he's 38. And he lives up in the foothills between my practice here outside of Sacramento and her in Nevada. And, he's been living in this house and all this stuff rent-free for years. And he feels entitled, and he's basically telling the sister and the mom, like, hey, this house is mine. And the sister's like, well, what should I do, Matt? Well, what you shouldn't do is do anything without finding out what the cost of care is going to be. And given the fact that the client is relatively young, I mean, she is in her mid-60s, but I mean, come on. What this says here is that she could live another 30 years. Will she be able to communicate? We don't know. Will something come along in 5 years to help her? We don't know. And if that something comes along in 5 years, will it cost $500,000 a dose? And given the fact that she wants to have her son be a part of her, I feel it's more than she can afford in her future. This is the textbook example of a boomerang, okay? The problem here is the entitlement.
That's something that's very interesting. I believe Brian and I were talking the other day. He had said something about the cost. Can she afford it? Brian, what was the cost per year or month that you had mentioned the other day?
Ranging from $100 to $500 per child per month. They were saying that it's not uncommon for these totals to reach 25 to 45% of the parent's monthly income.
That's heavy. At $500 a month, that's an extra $6,000 a year. Think about how much you make gross, and then net of taxes, that extra $6,000 a year.
We're all in the wrong business. It's easier. And this is the discussion that I had with the client's daughter is actually important too, because we have someone who is successful, who's saved, who's got their master's, going on to get their doctorate. They've been successful, and it's almost like they're penalized for being successful. And when we have people like ourselves who are successful and educated, we kind of think, and we look over someone who's on that proverbial couch, we kind of think like, well, how is that helping anybody. How's that fair? And I understand that people want to do the right things by their heart, but ultimately they're destroying their future. So their future self's going to go, what were you thinking? I know you were thinking with your heart, but could you at least thought with your head?
Well, both of you guys have children, but I can imagine, because my siblings have kids. Now, I know parents don't want to see their kids struggle, and I have nephews and nieces in their late teens, early 20s, still living at home, whether they're going to college or a trade school or opening a business or just working. And I'll ask my siblings, so do they plan on moving out anytime soon? What's their plan? They all say the same thing. Well, it's too expensive for them to move out. And they don't want them to struggle like we all struggled. And I'm not going to say it was an easier time, because it definitely wasn't, because we didn't have the technological advances. We're all the same age. So we're in our early to mid 40s. And we are on the cutting edge of the tech turn. So we were adapting to what the technology provides us with today. They have all that at their fingertips in the digital world. So we have the perfect combination of analog and digital. They really don't have a plan for when those kids are of age or in their 20s to move out. You guys have kids that are the same age. Let's say they're 20, still living at home. What are some of the things that are going to be going through your mind?
Well, if my son's at home and he's 20, it's because he's taking care of me, because I can't move, I can't do whatever, and I've been afflicted with something. Otherwise, it's one of those things. If he's at home, well, that'd be cool if he was going to school and he was a student. And I did the same thing. But we're talking about some other things here. We're talking about not people who really have a choice. We're also talking about people who do. Okay, there's a lot of us out there, advisors, who have clients who fit this. And again, I do to the T, and it's not good. And there's very little we can do as advisors to say, like, well, hey, the best thing you can do is talk to the doctor and figure out the level of care and what it's going to cost in the future, and be responsible and be good stewards. But what if you're in that situation because you just don't know any better? And what if you don't know any better because you were, again, thinking with your heart, not your head? And that, unfortunately, is the theme nowadays, where you talk about, whether it's the workforce, someone loses their job, the level of even food insecurity. I mean, these are serious concerns. Another concern we've been talking about that's afflicted me and several clients that I know, and tens of thousands of other Californians, is the loss of homeowners insurance. This particular client that I reference, who has that house that the son is living in, is in the middle of a forest. Okay. And she has to pay outrageous insurance rates because she was dropped. And it's like, so wait a second, you're going to pay XYZ dollars a year. What is your son doing about this? Anything? Is he looking for work? Is he keeping up the house? Is he, it'd be one thing if it didn't look like Beirut or a war zone there. It'd be one thing if he took care of it. It'd be one thing if he doesn't do anything. So at that point, it's just like, why would you insure it? So you insure it burns down? I mean, at a certain point, the clients and us as advisors have to sort of put on the hat, or the tough guy hat, if you will, and go like, well, hey, look, that might be nice in your own mind there, kid, but your mom or your parents or whoever it is, they need these dollars, and they're going to need them. And given the fact that you're literally doing nothing on the aggregate, it's not helpful.
I think the parallel for me is that the drive is different. When I was going to school, I wanted to make it on my own. And I remember watching a movie called The Secret to My Success, and it starred Michael J. Fox. Yeah. And he said something along the lines of, the day I go home is the day I've failed myself. Right. So looking at the kids now, and my kids especially, we've given them everything that we never had growing up. So I see them being 18, 20 years old and saying, I don't need to leave because we've already given them. And I think that's our fault. But now for us as advisors, we really need to look at a plan for them and maybe kind of urge parents to say, hey, might be important to start letting the kids know that you can't do this forever. I have a client who is about to retire. She's about 67 years old and she's still having to take care of her son. Her son wants to be a pastor. So it seems like she might have to continue to work and provide for the both of them.
Sounds like he's still out in the pasture. like come on.
So,
get to the ramp and launch, man.
A couple of things in a different format. So kids went from asking money for field trips, going to the mall with their friends on the weekend, and the movies. And that's transitioning to, can you help me with rent? Can you help me with my PG&E bill? Can you help me with my cell phone bill? Another format is parents owning rental property, having their kids move in, and that's even more expensive than that $100 to $500 a month.
Yeah,
that's that's here in the Bay Area, rental. I mean, you can rent a 3-bedroom, two bath property for $3,500 to $4,500 a month, and that's money parents are foregoing. That's decreasing their retirement income, and if they still have a mortgage on that, they're paying the mortgage, losing money on rent for opportunity costs. So it's coming from all different angles.
Absolutely, you got to figure, especially in the Bay Area there, and there's also another cost of living. You have your SALT, your local taxes. You also have your property tax. You have income tax. You have all kinds of fun taxes and the cost now that someone like her or some of us are absorbing with these, extortionate insurance rates, or just simply utilities, landscaping, as we know, fire abatement. I mean, that's huge here in California, and the cost of doing so. So when we look at this stuff, it's not like the trees and all this stuff are going to stop growing around us, right? Unless we go cut it down, okay? And that's fine. That's in the forest. But, in suburbia or in, civilization, we'll even call it, well, there's a cost of living. And when you are unloading a possibly sinking ship, it's never going to reach its destination. So now you have this issue where you got Ted, who's sitting on the client's couch, and it's her son, and Ted doesn't want to do anything. And why should Ted do anything? He's made it this far. And now that his mom is possibly in this situation, it's just like, well, that's further evidence for me just to continue to act like an idiot. We have this, and it's further reinforced by someone not really stepping in and going, hey, enough's enough.
At the same token, the job market and job volatility. I remember when I was younger, I would take almost any job just to have income while I was in college and even high school. Whether it's working at Cinnabon or hot dog on a stick, it was employment. And it was better to get a job while you're employed versus being unemployed, looking for a job. And I'm sure that still holds true today. But from my experience and the conversations I've had, are younger people are unwilling to take a job because it doesn't fit what they believe that, it's going to bring out the best version of myself, versus looking at it from the perspective of, I need to make some money. I need to stop couch surfing on my parents, my family members and friends' couches, and I need to go out and do my own thing. But they're unwilling to take the job, almost any job, just to make some money and then look for a different job until they're satisfied with the position that they do have.
That's very true. And then you have people who barely make it here and they work their tails off, and they can't get enough work. And it's just like, well, wait a second. What's their excuse? They don't have one. They're not afforded one. They don't have that luxury of having a fallback of mom and dad or Aunt Ethel. There is a lack of work ethic in this world. And there's a lot of people who feel entitled. And that has to be, addressed. The problem is when do you address it? Do you address it when we have children like Brian and I do? And you kind of put to them over years because they're boys. It's like, hey, man, don't even think that you're going to be loafing here. And I know my son's not, he'll be in the Premier League or doing what we do or whatever. I have no doubt about that. But the issue is that these things are not sustainable for clients, and for just people in general.
I have a client who had a child just graduate from, I want to say it's either UCLA or USC, one of the two prominent universities. He's been having trouble getting a job, and I think he's majored in, software engineering or like some form of computer science, and he's been having trouble. and he's not willing to take anything without that type of prestige of being a software engineer. So they're trying to figure out if he's going to do more schooling and get more education, and they're wiping out some of their non-qualified brokerage accounts to be able to sustain another tuition cost, to be able to put him in a position where he can get a job like that, right? So I don't know if their head's in the right place as well, but it's something that, I mean, if they want to plan for that, then something we need to think through.
My question is, what is the purpose of going to college? Is it to get a bunch of degrees, or is it to actually make money? So if you're worried about having a title, oh, I'm a software engineer, or I'm an engineer in general, again, you have to ask yourself, did I go to college because I want to make money? Or did I go to college just because I want to work for a specific company? Because you can make money selling oranges by the highway. Point is, going back to school and getting another degree, there's no guarantee to make more money. Who says that? But I can tell you, it'll be a big hit to his parents' retirement.
I agree.
Well, absolutely. And his immediate earning power and potential, as well as, robbing them of any kind of possibility of compounding returns or interest or anything like that. Because again, they're unloading a sinking ship. So what we have here is, sort of like this jacuzzi of problems. And there's all kinds of stuff floating around, and it ain't good. Okay. You have a dubious job market. You have a lot of people who, let's be honest, have given up seeking employment. And it's not because, I'm waiting for the software engineer management position. No, it's nothing like that. It's, hey, why should I go do that when the couch is really cool? It comes down to laziness. It comes down to entitlement. And it's really just coming down to whether it's family values or advice that's not taken or even not given. Again, to kind of step in to say, hey, look, enough's enough. This isn't sustainable. I understand that you want to help your family member, but you got to help yourself first. It's like total, oh my God, we're on a plane to retirement. Okay. Now, you've seen it every time. If you've been on a plane, you've always seen it overhead. It says, hey, you get one of these masks on, put it on first, then you do your kids. Okay. This is the same thing. You can't very well get to where you're going if you're not looking out for you first. And in this situation, it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to look out for oneself and go, hey, is this sustainable? Am I going to be in some sort of weirdo care facility that resembles something out of Fallout? You don't know what you're going to get.
What's the problem with allowing your child to take out a student loan, especially after you've already paid for a bachelor's and a master's? If you want to get even more education, thinking that's going to make you even more money, which it probably won't, there's got to be a point where you're like, take on that debt yourself, because the parent probably has debt on their mortgage or mortgages. And then depending on their age, how is that going to look like? Do they have to work another 5 or 7 years just to make up that deficit?
My parents did that to me. And I was so resentful. I was so mad that they put that loan on me as a young kid. And I saw my friends just have a nice, easy ride through school. And I was like, I have to pay for this myself. But it was a blessing in disguise. I was more driven to finish school because I had to pay for it myself. And I didn't want to acquire more debt going into the workforce. So definitely something that was a blessing in disguise for me.
Yeah, I paid off my own debt. I believe it's helped my character of who I am today, because it's made me go above and beyond what I believed was my limitation. And when I look back, I'm thinking, well, how the hell did I pay for that? How did I do this? You're in those kind of situations where you just have to dig down deeper. You don't think about it and you just keep going.
It is those situations, we'll call them. It's the self-actualization, we'll even call it. I have a different experience. I'm lucky enough where my dad told me, like, look, you're in school. I'll pay for it. As long as you have a job, as long as you're in school. You don't have one of those, guess what? It ain't happening. And, you can't really nowadays have that sort of cut and dry thing, because that would just be too strict. Like, what? Nowadays, it's like, oh, I can't believe your dad did that, dude. Well, back in the day, you said that you resented your parents. You said that you didn't have your parents to lean on. I had the luxury of that, but also something my dad told me, which I'll never forget. To be honest, I wasn't a very good student. I was in all these honors classes and all these AP classes, but I horsed around and I didn't really care except in history. And I thought, okay, well, cool. I'm going to go to college. And, but my dad said to me, look, you were in high school because you had to be. You're in college because you want to be. And you need to show me and everybody else, if I'm going to continue to pay for it, that you want to be. Now, if our clients in these situations told their kids, adult kids, by the way, we're not talking 10-year-olds and 12 and 13-year-olds like our sons. We're talking about adults here, people. If they told their kids, hey, look, man, in the very same way, you're not on the couch because you have to be. You're not afflicted with anything other than laziness. You're on the couch because you want to be. So get off it and go out there and do something and contribute. It'd be one thing like how we always talk between us, how we always want to do something every day to grow and to do something. Just be productive. One thing a day, for Pete's sakes.
How do you think that has impacted your career decision? Considering that now you're in the wealth management space, how has your experience helped you become better advisors with that experience where Matt, your dad giving you that ultimatum, Brian, you having that resentment against your parents?
That's a good question. I think going back in time, my focus was I didn't ever want to be put in that position again, or I didn't want my kids to have to be put in that position. So a focus of mine was to just try to grow my wealth, right? I wish I had parents that were focused. They were just trying to get through the day, get through each month and make sure that bills were paid. When I look at what I wish would have happened is that they had enough wealth where I was in those meetings and I was learning a little bit more about what was going on and maybe understanding what their situation was and understanding where the struggles were so that I wouldn't be a leech on them going forward. I think that's something that, looking back, that I wish would have happened.
Let's say, for example, those things were true. Do you think you would be the person you are today working in the career that you have right now?
Hard to say. I mean, this is something that I've always been interested in, business and having some form of exposure to it as a younger kid, because a lot of my cousins were in this business. Other than that, I don't know if I would, because a lot of my experiences have made me the person I am today and created the drive to be more successful. So it's hard to say.
What about you, Maddie?
I'm a second generation advisor. So when I was going to college at Sacramento State University, my whole future was me being a professor or an attorney or both. Okay. I never had any kind of inclination to go into finance because I was terrified, like going, wow, this is really serious. And I always see my dad, and he would always be great about separating between work life and home life and never bring anything home with him. But I knew it was very serious, and I knew it took dedication, and more importantly, I knew it took passion, and it took a real commitment. And it was at a point in time where I was in grad school. I was 21 years old. I mean, people had socks older than me. I was like, what am I doing here? I was interning for Morgan Stanley, and my dad's like, why don't you come and do this? And you're perfect for this. And he goes, well, when people come in, they see you, and they see you in a picture here, and they see you out here, and there's an established rapport. And what that did, and kind of going back to the theme here, is it gave me sort of confidence. I got a lot of motivation from the potential, the possibility that I could do the same thing my dad does. But as my dad always told me, I want you to do it better. I worked so hard so you didn't have to do what I did. So you didn't take on all that debt. My dad was working so many jobs when he got way young, in his 20s, when he first had me, just supporting us. It's a different world, man. Is it an easier world? Absolutely not. Are there more costs of living? You betcha. Are those things sustainable when you have a passenger in a boat who isn't rowing, and especially isn't rowing in the same direction? No. None of those things are sustainable. So at a very young age, I was given this choice, sort of this Y in this road, like, come and see what you can do here in this industry, or continue with what you're doing. Obviously, I chose the former.
So what are some of the things, in closing, gentlemen, that investors, clients, or prospective clients can take into action to help minimize their children staying at home longer, or minimize the expenses that they're helping out with? What are some of the best practices that you have at top of mind?
Have some frank discussions. Number one, with your three usual advisors here. And those three advisors, the usual advisors I call them, and clients know about this, would be me, one, a CPA, two, and an estate planning attorney, number three. Sooner or later, there needs to be a tax plan, an estate plan, and a financial plan accounting for something for all of this. So having a frank discussion and then maybe getting not in sort of a way that's like an intervention or anything, even though it might be interpreted as such, but starting this discussion with your trusted advisors and asking them, hey, look, we've been working together. What do you think I should do? And that's how it started with my clients. And really, it was kind of me going, hey, that doesn't sound right. Let's talk about that.
I think that makes sense. What about you, Brian? You have anything that comes to mind?
I think having a frank discussion is very important. Looking at financial planning tools and really showing how a success rate would look like with those pending costs, whether it's just going back to that article that we saw, an extra $500 a month, which is $6,000 a year, how much that would impact your success rate based on you having to provide for your child or being able to still continue to provide that lifestyle through retirement would be very difficult. So planning is something very important. I know there's tools out there that we are able to have our clients access where they can test and stress test their own assets based on all of these other extra expenses.
Also great advice. Well, we thank you guys for tuning in, and hopefully you found what we had to say valuable. And until next time, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for listening to the Sage Planning Solutions Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. If you want more information, visit our website at sageplanningsolutions.com.